Hi, welcome. In Jesus' time, if a Jewish son squandered his inheritance among Gentiles, the village elders gathered at the city gates. They smashed a clay pot at his feet and shouted, "May God shatter your life like this pot." That was Kezazah. The cutting off. The father was supposed to stay home and let it happen. But this father ran. He hitched up his robes, shaming himself, to reach his son before the pot could break. That is not just forgiveness. That is outrageous grace.
Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take those stories you think you know, pull them apart, really look closely, and find that forgotten context, the cultural stuff that just flips the whole meaning, Today, we're diving deep, really deep, into one of the big ones, the parable of the Prodigal Son, Luke 15. Now, for ages, we've mostly heard it as, well, a nice story about family forgiveness. The son comes home, dad's happy, but there's this layer underneath. A really sharp edge of community condemnation, this judgment the son was walking right into. And once you see that, the father's reaction, it goes from just, nice to something really radical, culturally defiant even. And look, the amazing insights we're getting into today, they come from some really careful work.
Yeah, from author and researcher pastor Adrian Swanepoel. He's with GodsNotDone ministry. He's spent years digging into these powerful cultural details that really unlock the story in a new way. We're really grateful for his research, honestly, and excited to share some of these insights with you today.
Oh, it's absolutely a pleasure. And before we jump in, I really want to pass something along. Pastor Adrian Swanepoel sends his love in regards to you listening right now. And I think by the end of our chat today, you'll see exactly why his ministry's message, that grace, just, completely triumphs over judgment. You'll see how it's shown so powerfully right here in this one incredible moment in the parable.
Absolutely, yeah. So our goal, our mission today is to really get our heads around this ancient Jewish custom. It's called Kezazah. That's Hebrew, meaning the cutting off. Because once you grasp how severe Kezazah was, how public, how final, then what the father does, that specific choice he makes, it just reveals this staggering level of sacrificial love. It's unexpected. We're hunting for those hidden details, the ones that turn this familiar forgiveness story into, a display of truly outrageous grace.
Exactly. We're shifting the frame, are we?
Yeah.
It's not just a family drama anymore. A dad welcoming his lost son home. It becomes this intense clash, merciless community custom on one side, driven by honor, and on the other, the father's immediate, preemptive, almost scandalous grace. The stakes you see are just so much higher than most of us ever realized.
Okay, right. Let's unpack the beginning then. The basic setup. We all know it. Younger son asks for his share, takes off, blows it all on what the Bible calls wild living. But let's pause on that first step. Asking for the inheritance early. To us, maybe it sounds like, asking for an advance. But culturally back then, why was this such a huge deal? Such a massive transgression?
Oh, it was devastating. Just devastating. You have to picture that first century Judean world. The father, the patriarch, he's everything. Inheritance, especially the land, the ancestral property tied to the covenant. That only changes hands when the father dies. Now, the younger son, he'd get the movable stuff, sure, but just asking for it before his father died, it was an unspeakable act of disrespect, utterly shameful.
So he wasn't just asking for money. He was kind of dismantling the family legacy while his father was still alive.
He was effectively saying publicly, "Dad, your life, it's in my way. I wish you were dead so I could get on with things." Imagine that. In an honor-shame culture where public perception is paramount, that single request, it inflicted this deep public wound on the father's honor, humiliated by his own son.
Wow, okay, so that's where it starts, wishing his father dead, basically. And then he makes it worse, right? How he actually uses the money.
Precisely. He doubles down on the betrayal. He takes the family wealth, the legacy, and squanders it. In a foreign land, no less. Now, the older son, later on, he complains it was spent on prostitutes, right? That's his angry, jealous accusation. But the actual text uses a very specific Greek word, asotos.
And that word asotos is important, isn't it? It's broader than just, vice.
It's much broader. Yeah. Asotos isn't just about having a wild time. It describes a complete lack of character. It means wasteful, spendthrift, someone living extravagantly without any savings, without any thought for the future, riotous living. The spending was just unrestrained, reckless. He wasn't just broke. He showed he had zero loyalty to the very resources he demanded. This wealth meant to support the whole family line was just vaporized for his own pleasure.
And it's the combination of that wastefulness plus where he wasted it that really pushed it over the edge, taking covenant money outside the community, into Gentile territory.
That is the ultimate betrayal from a Jewish perspective. You have to understand, wealth, especially for a family seen as blessed by God. It wasn't just cash, it had a sacred weight. It was tied to God's promises, the covenant. It demanded loyalty, fidelity to the Jewish community, to the law. So taking that sacred family money, God's blessing really, and just throwing it away among Gentiles, people outside the covenant, that was seen as desecration, profanity, an act deserving the community's harshest judgment, God's righteous judgment even.
And then the final descent, the pigs, which isn't just about poverty, is it? It's like the physical sign of his spiritual state.
Absolutely. For a Jewish man to end up feeding pigs, longing for their food even, these unclean animals, it's the rock bottom, visually, culturally, religiously repugnant. It showed how far he'd fallen from everything. He hadn't just lost his inheritance. He'd willingly stepped outside of ritual purity, outside the community covenant. He wanted the pigs' carapods. From the community's viewpoint, this selfish kid got exactly what he deserved. He'd earned God's judgment.
Okay, so he's ticked every box for social, financial, and religious disaster. He's heading home to a community that has every right, by their standards, to condemn him utterly. So what was the one thing, the single spark, that even allowed her to turn back towards home?
The text highlights it clearly. It was internal. He came to his senses and repented. That moment of clarity. He saw how low he'd sunk, realized that even his father's hired hands had it better. That repentance, that turning, that's what started his physical journey back. And it's crucial, as Pastor Adrian's work points out, if he hadn't repented and returned, he'd never have known the depth of the forgiveness waiting. But notice what he hopes for. Just to be a servant, the lowest rung. He expected judgment. He knew the community would demand it.
Right. That expectation of judgment, of maybe getting servant status if he's lucky, that leads us right into the harsh reality he was about to face. Let's talk about Kezazah, Hebrew, the cutting off.
Right.
What exactly was this tradition, and why is it so critical for understanding the parable?
Kezazah. Well, it's fundamental to understanding that first century Jewish social world, especially how they dealt with public honor and shame. Now, importantly, it wasn't a law written in the Torah, okay? It was a powerful, widely practiced Jewish tradition, a social legal custom designed specifically for these extreme cases of public disgrace. And it literally means cutting off, severing.
So if someone dishonored the whole community, Kezazah was the way they basically surgically removed that person permanently.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. It was the community's defense mechanism against profound betrayal, and it was usually aimed at a Jewish man who'd done exactly what the prodigal did, squandered his sacred inheritance among Gentiles, or brought some other kind of massive public shame on his family and his people. The goal, total, irreversible separation. Public shaming, condemnation, and effectively excommunication from the community and the faith.
Wow, that sounds incredibly severe, like a social death sentence while you're still alive. And the ceremony itself, it wasn't quiet or private, I take it.
Oh, absolutely not. This was public theater. Maximum shame.
Yeah.
The location was key. The city gates. Remember, the gates were where everything happened back then. Business, legal judgments, community meetings. It was the public square. So the village elders, the respected older men, the leaders, they'd gather right there.
Yeah.
And they'd be waiting. They'd know he was coming. News traveled fast. They'd be ready for him the moment he arrived.
Ready to perform the act as soon as he showed his face. Wow.
Ready to uphold the community's honor and expel the shame. That was their duty. And now the act itself, the famous broken pot, or pots sometimes. As the returning son, the shame-bearer, approached the gates, the elders, or maybe representatives, would take an empty clay pot and smash it violently right there at his feet.
Goodness, the sound alone, that shattering clay, must have been terrifying. And final, what exactly did that broken pot symbolize? What message were they sending?
It was a powerful, nonverbal curse, the pot shattering, that symbolized the relationship, utterly broken, irreparable, not just with his dad, who was already humiliated, but with the whole community, the whole covenant family, his faith. You can't really put a shattered pot back together perfectly, right? It's ruined, it's trash. And accompanying the smashing, there'd be words. A formal curse, often shouted out by the elders, maybe the crowd joining in, something like, "May God do to you what just happened to this pot. May God shatter your life. May your life be left in fragments because of what you did. We cut you off." This wasn't just telling him off, it was a formal declaration. Spiritual abandonment, social oblivion. He was an outcast, forever, a disgrace.
So the son is walking home, knowing this is likely waiting for him. The angry elders at the gates, the sound of shattering pottery, knowing he's about to be declared permanently cut off. Okay, that explains why he was only hoping to be a hired hand.
Exactly. He knows that if he gets to those gates, the custom of Kezazah will happen. His internal repentance doesn't stop the external consequence. And here's a really crucial detail for understanding the father's situation. The father's expected role in all this. Traditionally, the father was required to stay home. He had to be stoic, emotionally distant, aloof. He had to basically accept the community's judgment on his son. It was necessary to preserve whatever family honor was left.
He had to act like he agreed with the community's decision, even if it broke his heart.
Yes. Community honor had to come before parental feeling, you see, or else the father himself and his whole household could face the community's anger, maybe even judgment, too. So the son was utterly alone, facing the worst kind of public shaming his culture knew, and his own father was supposed to just let it happen, passively allow his son to be socially destroyed.
Okay, that's the grim backdrop. The son walking toward guaranteed public condemnation, excommunication. The father expected to stay home, silent, letting justice run its course. And this is where the story just explodes. It goes from history lesson to, frankly, shock value. Because the son is still a long way off, the text says, and the father. He ignores every single thing we just described. He doesn't stay home. He doesn't walk slowly. He doesn't preserve his dignity. He runs. He takes off running.
That run, it's not just emotion. It's a massive, scandalous cultural earthquake. You really cannot overstate how shocking, how honor-violating this single act was. This is the absolute pivot point of the parable. The moment grace becomes, well, outrageous.
Let's break that down. Why was it so shocking? We hear father runs and think, oh, loving dad.
Yeah.
But they would have seen an old man, a patriarch, doing something deeply dishonorable.
Exactly that. In that culture, especially for an older man, a man of wealth, status, position, you did not run in public, period. Running was for servants rushing on errands, for messengers, for young boys playing. Men of standing, respected elders, they walked slowly, deliberately, with dignity. It conveyed their honor, their seriousness, and there's a practical side too. To run, a man had to hitch up his long outer robes, the very robes that signified his status, and hitching them up meant, well, exposing his legs, maybe even his thighs, in public. And that was considered deeply shameful, undignified. It was culturally taboo.
Okay, hold on. Let's stress that taboo point. Because it wasn't just like, oh, that's a bit awkward. It connects to religious purity, doesn't it?
It does, deeply. There's scriptural background for the sensitivity about exposure. Think about the temple, the altar. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 26, and later detailed again in chapter 28, priests serving near God's altar were explicitly forbidden from exposing their nakedness. Altars were even built without steps to avoid any chance of robes being hitched up, legs being seen. It was linked to ritual purity, the sacredness of the body before God.
So, if showing your legs near God's altar was basically a punishable offense, for a respected patriarch to do it running down a public road for any reason less than, say, fleeing a fire, it was just unimaginable.
Utterly unimaginable. He was deliberately inviting public ridicule, community scorn, dishonor upon
So
himself.
he's sacrificing his own honor, his dignity, the family standing, everything.
Completely. He was willing to look like a fool, a desperate old man violating basic decency in front of everyone, and they all knew why he was running. They knew who he was running towards.
So he throws his dignity away to get to his son. But why the sprint? What was the rush? If it cost him so much, why not just walk really fast?
Time was critical. He ran because he had to. He saw his son a long way off, right? He knew instantly that news would be spreading like wildfire through the village. He's back. The disgrace has returned. The village elders, they'd be grabbing their pots, heading for the gates right now, getting ready for Kezazah. The community was mobilizing for condemnation.
So he had to beat the Kezazah ceremony to the punch.
Exactly. He had to sprint to intercept his son before the shaming started, before the condemnation, before the cutting off. His goal wasn't just a welcome hug. It was a public physical intervention. He had to preempt the entire community justice process.
But hang on, if the elders were already gathering, couldn't they just wait for him to catch his breath and then break the pot anyway? How does one old man running stop the whole ritual?
Ah, that's the genius of it. The run itself was a public statement. By running towards his son out there on the road before they reached the official judgment spot at the gates, the father was drawing a new line. He was establishing a preemptive zone of grace. His embrace out there on the road became the new reality. It was a powerful public declaration. He's forgiven. He's included. Judgment is canceled. He essentially took the shame onto himself first. He performed an act of incredible self-sacrifice. By humiliating himself, he restored his son. He publicly shouted, without words, "This boy is mine, his shame. It's my shame now. His restoration is done. You will not break a pot over my son. Any breaking happens over me."
Wow. So he was willing to face the kind of shame, the social penalty that was almost equivalent to the Kezazah ceremony itself. He basically performed Kezazah on his own dignity.
In a way, yes. He broke every rule, societal norms, cultural dignity, maybe even applied religious boundaries about exposure. He chose love over law, over tradition, over communal justice. He was literally running ahead of the world's judgment to claim his son first. It's exactly why Pastor Adrian Swanepoel's message resonates so strongly here. It perfectly illustrates that truth. God has the final say and the last move. The community wanted the final say with that pot. The father made the last move with that run.
That connects it perfectly. The cultural defiance reveals the core message. He ran. He showed his legs. And crucially, he forgave and embraced his son before the community could officially cut him off. He intercepted the judgment, and that act just completely reframes the whole parable. Okay, let's take that radical action then, this defiance of dignity, of tradition, and connect it to the big picture. Spiritual meaning. If the father is willing to take on that much public shame, what does his running tell us about grace versus condemnation?
It tells us one huge, undeniable truth, I think. Grace will outrun condemnation every single time, assuming the person's turning back, seeking return. The father's run guaranteed that the son, who absolutely deserved the harshness of Kezazah by the standards of the day, he never actually felt its sting. He never suffered that public shame. The father ran outside the city gate, that place where judgment happens, specifically to shield his child from it. That's the very nature of preemptive grace, isn't it? The son was still practicing his little speech about being a servant, remember? And the father just cuts him off, stops the speech, stops the potential judgment in its tracks, and immediately starts the restoration. Get the ring, get the robe, get the sandals, kill a fatted calf. The debt's gone. The status is back right now, before the community could even mutter about exclusion.
But not everyone was thrilled with this outrageous display of grace, which brings us to the other son, the older brother. We usually just label his anger as jealousy. But in this cultural context, knowing about Kezazah, his fury actually makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Oh, absolutely. From his perspective, the honor-bound, rule-following community member, the older son's anger is completely logical, understandable even. It wasn't just about missing out on a party goat. He was deeply, profoundly offended. Why? Because his father was trashing sacred community tradition. He was undermining the foundations of justice and honor as the older son understood them.
The older son truly believed his younger brother deserved Kezazah. He deserved the shame, the exclusion, the broken life symbolized by that pot. He'd earned it. Exactly. The older brother represents that mindset perfectly. The one that prioritizes law, rules, strict justice, earned righteousness over unearned mercy. He was essentially shouting, "Dad, the law says the pot should have been broken. You broke the rules. You violated justice. And now you've shamed me, the loyal son, by throwing a party for the traitor."
His reaction just throws that tension into sharp relief, doesn't it? The clash between those bound by tradition and judgment and those who embrace radical, unconditional love. You know, his rigid adherence to the rules meant he was kind of lost too, wasn't he? Just standing outside a different gate, the gate of his own self-righteousness. You couldn't see the beauty in his father's love. He saw it as weakness, maybe foolishness. Because he didn't get that real restoration, required the father to bear the cost, to absorb the condemnation himself.
Which brings us right back to the divine parallel. If this father represents our heavenly Father, what does this undignified run, this willingness to bear shame, tell us about God? The parallel is just breathtaking when you see it this way. The father, embodying God's redeeming heart, willingly took on shame, an act unthinkable for a patriarch, all to shield his son from judgment. And how does that not point us directly to Jesus Christ? God, in the person of Jesus, took on the ultimate shame, the ultimate punishment for all of humanity's sin upon himself. And think about where Jesus bore that shame. Where did the crucifixion happen? Outside the city gate of Jerusalem, at Calvary. Just like the father ran out to where judgment awaited, taking the humiliation of exposed legs, the public ridicule, Jesus took the ultimate public shame of the cross to bring us back, to restore us.
So the father runs to bring inclusion where Kezazah screamed for permanent exclusion.
That's the heart of it, isn't it? The father's love means inclusion, full restoration, no matter how far gone the son was. And it challenges us, doesn't it, to move beyond our comfortable societal norms, our sense of fairness, maybe even our religious rules sometimes, and try to emulate that father's grace, a grace that might cost us something, our dignity, our pride, our sense of justice. Understand, Kezazah really shows us the potential cost of true grace. And this whole deep dive, it really does anchor that powerful message from God's Not Done ministry, doesn't it? It's this incredible picture of hope, of restoration. It reminds all of us that no matter what condemnation the world tries to throw, no matter what pot they try to break, God has the final say in the last move. And his move, it's always driven by that preemptive, self-sacrificing love.
Wow, this has been, truly essential. We took all this dense stuff, ancient Jewish customs, finance rules, honor culture, that devastating Kezazah ritual, and saw how one simple, undignified act of father running just changes everything about the prodigal son. It stops being just a sweet story about forgiveness. It becomes this profound example of sacrificial love that completely defies cultural justice and the community's demand for payback.
Yeah, and when you see the story through that harsh light of the broken pot, the whole idea of grace feels different, heavier almost. Knowing the father chose shame, chose public ridicule, maybe even ritual impurity, just offer immediate unconditional inclusion. It really forces you to rethink how we look at people who mess up, who fail, who stray. And maybe the final thought for you to chew on is this. If we admit we're all prodigals in some way, all saved by that running father, how often are we like the older brother? How often do we struggle when we see that same unconditional grace given to someone else, someone who, by our standards, maybe deserved a bit of Kezazah? Now that we understand what that broken pot really meant, a permanent curse, a shattered life, does it change how we judge failures, big or small, in our own lives and communities today? Are we sometimes, maybe without realizing it, performing a kind of modern Kezazah on people? That's something the story really makes you ask.
That's a powerful question to end on, a perfect thought to carry forward. And we really want to thank Pastor Adrian Swanepoel of God's Not Done ministry again. His research, his insights, they just open up these stories in such a rich way. It helps us see the Bible with fresh eyes.
Absolutely. And as we close out this deep dive, we'd love to speak Pastor Adrian Swanepoel's favorite blessing over you, our listener. It's from the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verses 24 to 26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.
Amen. Thank you so much for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll be back next time, ready to turn the page on another fascinating piece of history and faith.